On today's show, the Dallas Mavericks have had an up and down season, to say the least. But what has defined this season? Not a stretch of games, but some stats. We'll talk about that and more on today's Locked On Mavs.
I'm Luka Doncic, and this is Locked On Mavericks.
Mavericks, NBA champions. It's good, and the Mavericks have won the game.
If you don't believe, you shouldn't be here.
Loyalty never fades away.
Welcome. You are locked on to the Dallas Mavericks. My name is Nick Angstadt, media member and NBA channel manager for the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for being part of the show, making Locked On Mavs your first listen each and every day. We are free and available on all podcast platforms or on YouTube, where the best way you can help us grow the show is to listen every day and to comment anything below. Let us know what has defined the Mavs season so far. I'm sure there will be many thoughts, many things said. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Basketball GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an NBA GM and managing your basketball franchise? I did. Then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimatebasketballgm.com or look it up in the App Store. Again, Ultimate GM, NBA GM. Our listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when you use the promo code LOCKEDON, all caps, in the game. Talk about that later. Joining me, as always, my co-host, writer, contributor at Mavs.com. The Stat Sultan, the One More Thing King. What you got for me, Isaac Harris?
Well, first, we literally just hit record. Right before we hit record, we saw the Paul George injury.
Oh, boy.
And, first off, man, if it's super bad as it looks, then, man, just hate that for him. Obviously, he had the horrific injury back Team USA years ago. Feels like, gosh, forever ago.
Yeah, it does.
But that team has been rolling and everything. And once again, not to jump to like standing stuff, but it's like, once again, there's another team in the West that is hampered by injuries, more question marks, all of that. It's just wild that it's just insane to think about the Western Conference this year. And we're, 10, 12 games left for most teams. And to find
here come the Thunder.
To find a team that you're the most confident in is kind of difficult. But let's go to your question about what defines the Mavs. I know today's episode is going to be about what stats have defined the Mavs this season, but you made me think of it real quick. If it wasn't a stat, if it was one player or one person that has defined the season so far for the Mavs, do we both agree that it's Jason Kidd? From a narrative standpoint, that has
it's still got to be Luka to me. I mean, from fans, it's obvious it's going to be Jason Kidd, but I think just from, let's take the bias out of it, take all of it, it still rises and falls on Luka.
Okay, because I think it has the potential, depending on how the Kyrie Luka pairing goes into the playoffs. Let's say they make a run, then I think you'll look back on it and be like, oh, the Kyrie trade was that defined the season.
We did last year. We did that last year with the Dinwiddie-Porzingis trade.
Yeah, so although
I wouldn't say that Dinwiddie defined the season necessarily, or Porzingis.
Well, think about it right now. Yes, I think it's a combo of Luka's, if you just had to pick one bigger thing, it's either Luka's MVP type of season before injuries, or it's the Jason Kidd experience this whole year.
Yeah, if it was one person. But today we're not doing that. Today we're gonna do some stats that have defined the season and tell us what this Mavs season has been all about, what their big weaknesses have been, what their strengths maybe have been. And I'm gonna start with this. Ooh. The Dallas Mavericks are 19-7 when they have a defensive rating under 111 points. So that's good. A defensive rating under 111, 19-7. That sounds like a good number, right? False. Yeah. That's terrible. 7 losses when their defensive rating is under 111 is bad. I'm calling these these 7 inexcusable losses that the Mavericks have had.
Sins.
They all came in the first 3 months of the season, and they've had these losses. And I point out these losses when the Mavericks had a good defensive rating because it doesn't come often for the Mavericks. The Mavericks this season have been an incredible offense, a terrible defense. And when you have a terrible defense, when you get these good defensive games, you got to take advantage of them. Take a look, for instance, at the Denver Nuggets, 23-1 this season when they have a defensive rating under 111 points.
Oh,
Kings 14-3 when they have a defensive rating under 111. Mavericks are 19-7. So they have these 7 losses that have just completely changed the season. A lot of them were early in the season, and a lot of them are the terrible ones you look back on and go, how did the Mavericks lose this game? You have the overtime loss to OKC earlier in the season, when the Mavericks were up 16 with 5 minutes left in the game. You have the Orlando loss, where there was no Paolo, no Fultz, no Cole Anthony, that loss. You have the Wizards loss the day after that one, where there was no Beal, no KP. The Mavericks lost that one. You have the Houston loss, where Luka didn't play, but the Mavericks still lost to Houston, which was awful. You have the Denver loss early in the season, where there was no Jokic, no Murray, no Gordon, and that was a clutch loss. Then you have the Bucks loss, where it's the inexcusable free throw game, where the Mavericks were 7-15 from the free throw line in the fourth quarter. Giannis fouled out with 3 minutes to go. They still lost the game. Then the last one was the Kemba Walker Cleveland game, where Luka didn't play. A bunch of Mavericks didn't play in that one. That one's tough. That one's tough one, but we had the Kemba Walker one. And so you have these losses and you're like, okay, those are all early in the season, but you take 4 or 5 of those losses and they very easily could turn into wins. They're a lot of them are clutch losses. The Mavs had a good defense in those games. You take 4 or 5 of those losses, turn them into wins. The Mavericks are comfortably 4th in the West right now. And we're not talking about any of this. Like, and the Mavericks season has been good so far, right? Like, you just look at those. And I think those inexplicable losses have like defined the season so far.
Yeah, I have some, one of my 3 is about some bad losses stuff, but I'll save it because it's a little bit different. But I mean, if we just look at any stats to define the season, it's the defense. Like, pick your lane of what you want to do for on the defensive side. I think it's the perfect one to just the defense as a whole in this first segment here that's define the season for the Mavs on the basketball, court there. And I'll do this. For me, one of mine is the rectangle on the basketball court of the NBA paint.
Oh, I had to paint one too. Yeah.
The season for the Mavs, let's look at that on both sides of the ball. For on defense, if you look at how many points the Mavs have allowed in the paint this season, they're averaging 50.8. So you can say 51, but 50.8 points per game. That's 19th worst in the league. These are the teams that are averaging more points in the paint than them, 20 through 30. Wizards, Pacers, Hornets, Lakers, Blazers, Nuggets, Jazz, Kings, Hawks, Pistons, Spurs.
Oof. So,
with the exception of Denver and Sacramento on this, you're looking at a lot of teams that are in the play-in or past the play-in in the bottom 10 teams that are not getting the participation ribbons of going to the play-in tournament. So, honestly, when I first looked this up, I was like, this is probably going to be worse than, I thought it was going to be worse than what it was. The mid at 19. I thought they're going to be like 25 to 30 because how many games have we looked at and said, dude, they gave up another 60 points in the paint. They can't defend the paint at all. Let's flip it to the other side and say on offense, how many points this season per game for the on offense scored. Let's do totals instead of per game. You know who is 30th in the league in points in the paint on offense this season?
The Dallas
Mavericks.
It.
It's the Dallas Mavericks. So not only are they not scoring in the paint this season, but they're not defending in the paint at all this season either. So can we say in Nick Angstadt fashion, can we say the whole season's defined for the Mavericks inside the paint? I'm not ready to go that far, but it at least tells some type of story.
I'll take you a step further. I'll write the next chapter of your story.
Oh, please do.
When allowing 50 points in the paint, the Dallas Mavericks are 17-24 this season.
That's awesome.
When the Mavericks have scored themselves 50 points in the paint, they're 10-9, which is still not good. But because a lot of the times when they score 50 points, they're allowing 60 points on the other end of these, or at least like 40. They're never dominating in the paint. They're always getting killed in the paint, at least scoring wise. You want to know a random stat though that surprised me?
Oh, please tell me.
When the Mavs allow 60 points, don't tell anybody on that. Don't tweet this. Don't tell anybody this. This is not a stat that follows any of the narratives, anything that we just said.
Don't tell anybody. All right.
When the Mavs allow 60 or more points in the paint, they're 8-5.
Whoa, You just figured it out.
If they allow 50 points in the paint, you might as well allow 60 because you could win. You could probably win that game.
That's what Jason Kidd is doing. He's playing chess while everyone else is
just
playing
tank the paint. Tank it in the paint, and then they'll win. They're 8-5 when they allow 60 or more points in the paint, but they're 17-24 if they allow 50 or more. So the 50 to 60 points is that's
like,
what
all right,
destroy.
We need to allow another like 8 points to get to 60. Dwight, hey, check in.
So the defense has absolutely been brutal for the Mavericks.
Yeah.
It has defined the season for sure.
Those were the stats defensively.
Those were the stats. The Mavericks 19-7 when they have a defensive rating under 111, and the points in the paint have been the biggest thing. Coming up, I've got some more. 3-point shooting has been another thing that has absolutely been a crutch for the Dallas Mavericks, and we'll talk about that and why it's been so bad. We'll talk about that coming up. Before we do, let me tell you about this new app that I went on a trip recently to the Grand Canyon. A lot of traveling, a lot of flying, a lot of driving to places. There's nowhere really like close to stay at the Grand Canyon, and so you're like driving around a lot. And I played so much Ultimate Pro Basketball GM on my phone. I sat there. I'm not lying to you.
Glad you enjoyed the canyon.
Just driving. Like you're looking out at the scenes, and you're like, okay, yeah, they're mountain. I'm enjoying it, and then you're like, okay, well, I still have another hour to go before we're about to be where we're going to be. And so I just sat there and I played Ultimate NBA GM or Ultimate Pro Basketball GM. You can go get it on your phone right now. And if you're going to use it, use the promo code. I guarantee it, because when you first start, you're not going to be good at it. It's tough. You have to figure out all these different things. And if you want to be a GM of your team, you make trades, you draft, you build facilities, you have all these players that have to fit certain styles. So like you look at a team and you get it and you're like, okay, my head coach is a flex offense guy, but my star player is a pick and roll guy. And so you're like trying to fit it all together, and it is addicting, and I loved it. And I love this game. Use the promo Locked On, all caps, one word, Locked On, in the game store so that you can get the extra boost. You're going to need that boost early. Again, probasketballgm.com or Pro Basketball GM, the Ultimate Pro Basketball GM app on your phone. Go check it out. All right, Isaac Harris, thanks everybody for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs, making us your first listen, supporting the show. You are part of the Raccoon Squad. If you listen every single day, we appreciate you. All right, we're talking about stats that define the season. We talked about the defense earlier. Now let's take to the other side of the court, the 3-point line. Here's my stat. My stat that has defined the season. The Mavericks are 16-30, their record, when shooting under 40% from three. 16-30.
Well, yeah, because they're not scoring in the paint.
Denver, to compare, I compare Denver and Sacramento to the Mavs a lot because they're a high-powered offense and a bad defense. You can't compare Memphis. It's just not they're just not even the same boat. Like, you can't compare any of those teams. The Mavs, 16-30 when they shoot under 40% from three. Denver is 22-23. So, like, they still don't have a winning record, but they're at least not getting destroyed on that. Sacramento, 20-25. Same thing. Like, they're closer to 500 there, but the Mavericks, 14 more losses than wins when they shoot under 40%. That has been absolutely brutal because the Mavericks are still so reliant on the three that they just can't get their offense any other way.
Yeah, because when you look at where they rank this season, just now pulling up here some of their 3-point stuff, they're third in the league in 3-point attempts per game. They average a little over 40 a game. They're third in the league in 3-point makes. They're 10th in the league in 3-point percentage. It's kind of similar to last year. They're going to get a ton of 3-pointers up. This is the whole style of their offense. Like,
that's it.
Let Luka do his thing, be the quarterback, find the guys in the corners and all that. So if you're not getting into the paint and you're not hitting threes at a high clip, the odds of you winning the basketball game pretty slim. You got to score somewhere. So, yeah, I feel you on that.
Yeah, it has come down to that. And honestly, it's come down to kind of Tim Hardaway Jr. because he's the X factor when it comes to 3-point shooting because he takes them over the top or brings them down in these games. When Tim Hardaway Jr. shoots under 30% from three, the Mavs are 9-14. It's bad. 9-14 when Tim Hardaway Jr. shoots under 30%. When Tim Hardaway Jr. makes 0 or 1 3-pointers, the Mavericks are 6-12. When he makes 3 or more, they're 21-12.
Wow.
Like literally the difference between like he makes 2 more threes a game and the Mavericks are a completely different team at that point. So I think he's been the catalyst to that. But this happens even when Luka doesn't play, right? It just has become the Mavericks offense. I wouldn't even put this all on Luka. Luka creates the best, the best looks, but this is a team by design thing. How many times has Kid been saying, we don't want to be relying on the three this year? I think he said it at training camp this year, and it just hasn't been true.
I don't always tell you guys the truth.
You had that ready. Somebody tell Sky work with John, who listens to the pod a lot. He told me the other day, he's like, "Hey, when are you gonna get your own soundboard?
So we can have dueling soundboards."
He's like, you really need your own. I was like, okay.
We can have different sounds loaded on each board.
Let me think about it. All right, let me give you one.
Yeah.
So one of the things this year, I mean, I know a lot of teams, almost every team in the league can, pull this card of, hey, we've missed players. It's like, okay. A lot of teams have missed players, with the exception of like Sacramento. They've stayed pretty dang healthy this season.
When you go on that season like the Mavs did last year, the Kings are having the season the Mavs did last year, right? I even listened to Locked On Kings, and Matt George said, "Enjoy this because next year there's going to be expectations, and it'll be miserable if they don't reach them." And I was like, "Hey, that's us. That's us over here at Locked On Mavs."
But anyway, obviously Maxey tore his hamstring. That was a huge thing, losing Maxey. Just such a unique player in the front court. Josh Green had that like weird elbow thing. And, now Luka's missed games. Even, Kyrie's missed games since he's been here.
Dorian early.
Yeah, Dorian early on. So you look across the board, and one of the things I looked up was, all right, to me, the three best defenders on the team, Reggie, Josh, and Maxey. How many minutes do you think them three with Luka have played together this season?
Oh, it's not a lot. It's like under 300.
68 minutes together.
I was right.
One away from 69. But so they've only played 68 minutes together, those four guys, Luka and the three best defenders. And I put that in there because that's noticeable, right? I mean, obviously, Dorian would have been in that before the trade and all that. But right now, talking about team chemistry, playing together and all of that. And then I'll take you a step further. I think those four with Kyrie, that's your best lineup. Maxey at the 5, probably playing this small ball 4 with Reggie at the 4, Josh, and then the two, stars. Those 5 together have only played 8 minutes together. So I wouldn't say that defines the season because, Kyrie trade happened later on and all this stuff. But if we're looking at the combinations, I was looking at a bunch of different lineup combinations, how many minutes, if we looked at those 68 minutes, they're a +8 net rating in that, 108 defensive rating, 117 offensive rating. And with those four guys, Luka and the three best defenders, but they gotta have time to build up their chemistry and how they play together and all that. So I think that means something whenever you have, two guys like Maxey and Josh miss so many games.
Yeah, that's been massive. And that has been the biggest hurt to their defensive rating. Because when you talk about this Mavericks defense, you're talking about everybody on the same page, everybody rotating, in unison, knowing where to go. And if you're playing with different guys, and if you're Josh Green playing in 3-4 different positions, you don't know all the time where you're supposed to be because you don't know, okay, I got to make up for Luka here, or I got to go run over here, or I got to do this. And last year's team, they played together a lot, and we saw a lot of them. Like, they didn't have these injuries. They had the trade, but once the trade happened, it was so seamless because the core of their defense stayed intact. Those two wings, once they figured out that Reggie had to play.
I have to apologize that you felt that he should have played more
with Dorian. Then all of a sudden then Maxey entered the closing lineup. Then all of a sudden you're like, all right, our core of our defense is intact with Luka and Brunson, who knew where they were supposed to be. And all that. So I think that the injury thing has been huge. I mean, it's just messed up the rhythm of their defense so much. And if you look at a lot of those games that I mentioned earlier where the Mavericks had a good defensive rating and didn't win, they were missing guys.
And JaVale, missing games for.
Okay, can we talk about that for a second? Has that defined the season?
No, it hasn't.
Because if that worked, it'd be so different. But it didn't work so badly. Like
it didn't work at all. So bad. But it's not okay. Coming up after a break,
we're going to tease JaVale.
No, we're not going to tease that. I actually want to say why.
I don't even have
some of these. I want to explain a little bit of why I landed on some of the things I did and not some of the other obvious things.
I like that tease. Talk about that coming up. Before we do, let me tell you about FanDuel. FanDuel is the number one sportsbook in America. It's the official sportsbook of Locked On. Go to FanDuel.com/LockedOn to see what's available for you. You can get, they have play-in stuff available. To make the East play-in, you ready for this? Yes. Minus 6,000, the Raptors. So you got to bet.
Wow.
What do you have to? You have to bet 6,000 to win 100. That's not good. Not good odds. Hawks minus 4,000. Bulls minus 950. Heat minus 220. Brooklyn Nets plus 140, and Wizards plus 600. Oh, I did the opposite. The Raptors to make the play-in. You bet $100 and you could win 6,000 if the Raptors make the play-in.
Okay.
That doesn't make any sense. Maybe I messed this up. Sorry,
you might have, but go to FanDuel.
Sorry, FanDuel.
And FanDuel will help you figure it out.
If you're better at these odds than me, or if you can read, go to FanDuel and see what you can put some money on, see what's available, and just see what they think about the NBA right now. I just like to look at it and see, who they have to win the finals. They have the Bucks right now, the Celtics number 2, Suns number 3. You can go check that out. Go check it out. It's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. All right, Isaac Harris, we appreciate you guys hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs. We've got, for the diehards, like the real Raccoon Squad, you're still here listening. If you're interested, we're looking into starting a subtext, not a substack, a subtext, where you can text us. We can answer questions. We'll text you. It'll be text directly to your phone. What would you like us to do with an app like that? We got a bunch of ideas. I think we got some really good ones, but we want to know what you guys would think. So tweet at us, DM, comment on YouTube. Let us know what you would want us to do with a subtext, texting type messaging service. Let us know in the comments or on Twitter.
Yeah, altar calls, through Nick.
We could send exclusive altar calls through our subtext, through texting. And it would text straight to your phone. It would look like a texting number. It'd be really direct, and so it'd be a really nice way to connect with us.
Yeah. Okay, let me explain this. There are a few things when I looked at it, and I was like, all right, what would listeners / fans of the Mavs say? And looking at some of the stats and stuff that would define the season. Some of the things I looked at when I started looking at these stats is it had to be different from last year. Like, it can't be something that they were bad in last year, now they're bad in again. That I would, like, for me, I wouldn't pick that because I'm like, it didn't define this season because it was kind of the same last year too.
It's fair. The 3-point shooting is probably that. Like, we would probably say the same thing last year. Shocker.
Let me bring up the rebounding here. They're 30th in the league this year in rebounding. Okay. They're not good. They're horrible at rebounding the basketball. Last year, my point in this, why I didn't put rebounding in this, they can get better in rebounding. Okay. And it would definitely help the team. Last year, they were 24th in the league in rebounding. They went to the Western Conference Finals. So they weren't a good rebounding team last year either. So that's my point of why I didn't put rebounding in there, because it's all about the makeup of the team and the roster that, there are a few people in the comments like, yeah, he's totally said that rebounding, doesn't matter. It's never about rebounding not matter. My whole thing is it just doesn't define if they win or lose or not. They can win basketball. How this team is made up. They went to the conference finals by getting obliterated on the rebounding battle in both the series, Phoenix and Utah.
They did.
And they beat both of them. It's not ideal. And if they go out and get a DeAndre Ayton or a Rudy Gobert, you definitely got to win the rebounding battle then. So that's why I didn't do rebounding. There was another stat in there, pace. And it's like, hey, they go so slow. And it's like, well, they were really slow last year too. So that's why I didn't pick some of those others. Anyway.
Would you say that comment about rebounding has defined your career as a broadcaster, podcaster?
People just don't understand it. I just don't.
It doesn't come off in a tweet well. When someone says, oh, Isaac Harris said rebounding doesn't matter, then all of a sudden you look at that and you're like, okay, well, and then you start wondering man, did Skip Bayless maybe say something that I took in a tweet and didn't agree with?
Thanks, Skip. All right, do you want to give your third or you want me to go first?
I got some more.
Some more. You told me 3.
I know. I have
15.
I already shared 6, I think. The Mavs have 8 clutch losses since the Kyrie debut. That's the most in the NBA. So since February 8th, they have 8 clutch losses. Nobody else has Only that the Pistons have 7, the Hawks have 6, Bulls, Clippers, Lakers, Timberwolves all have 6. These are all bad teams besides the Clippers.
Yeah.
Like they all, and so those 8 losses I think have defined the season, because if those losses all go differently, we're talking about this in a completely different manner, right? Even if 4 of those go differently, this team if 4 of those clutch losses since the Kyrie debut turn into wins just by 1 made shot, 1 free throw, like just these little things here and there. 1 27-point lead that doesn't get blown in the Lakers game. Like that changes. 4 of those losses, you all of a sudden became a 40-32 team. That's your record. And you're comfortably in 4th. Like it's just these games, it comes down to just 4 games here, 5 games here, and then all of a sudden that changes it. And I think those clutch losses so far have defined the way that the season is right now.
Okay.
You don't agree?
I agree.
Oh, okay.
No, I do. Yeah, I do. Well, okay, let me bring up a lost thing. You
agreed but didn't like it.
No, I do. I was thinking about something else in it, and I was like, how I was going to word something. But you brought up some bad losses they had earlier in the season.
Yeah.
I think some of these clutch losses go into this too. Okay, when you look at the standings, what's a name that we can call the bottom 10 teams in the league? You know, since 20 teams basically have some type of postseason basketball and get the ribbons, there's 10 teams that don't. Like the lowly 10, you know, the five teams in each conference right now. So
the Tankathon watchers.
So look at them in each conference right now. In the East, Pacers, Wizards, Magic, Hornets, Pistons. In the West, Lakers, Pelicans, Blazers, Spurs, and Rockets. This season,
with those. Oh, I don't want to hear this one. Oh, I know where you're going with
10
this.
10 teams.
Oh my gosh.
With those 10 teams, they have 13 losses. 13 losses with those 10 teams. Okay.
That's so bad.
With Orlando, OKC, New Orleans, and Portland losing to all 4 of those teams twice. Okay. Not only do they have 13 losses, but they've lost to every single one of those teams except for 2. The Spurs, which they almost did the other night, and the other team, not to jinx it, is the Charlotte Hornets coming up. Okay. They have 2 games against the Hornets coming up. The
greatest jinx in Mavs podcast just happened.
Here we go. They have 2 chances.
LaMelo's coming back from injury and going off for 50. It'd be Terry Rozier. Sorry, it would be Terry Rozier. Terry Rozier will go off for 50.
They have 2 chances to add the Hornets to this list, but to define the season, 13 losses against the bottom 10 teams in the league. That's pretty tough. Pretty tough.
That was tough to listen to.
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie.
Exactly when you knew where I was going, you're like, "This is like a car wreck."
Oh my god, stop. 13. Okay, that's the bottom 10 teams in the NBA right now.
Yep.
So like the Thunder aren't in there.
Yes, the Thunder are in there, but yeah, when I pulled it, they weren't in there. My bad.
Still, I think they have. This. Well, you switch Thunder and maybe Pelican. Anyway. That's brutal. I mean, that does define this. Think about some of these things we've talked about. My defensive rating one, which are all early in the season. Some of those were to those teams you talked about. Then the 8 clutch losses I talked about later. Like you switch a bunch of those games around. Luck goes your way. A couple different ways.
They've also lost to Utah. Like if you go right up into the play-in a little bit, they've lost to Utah. Yeah. Obviously the OKC one I was talking about. Chicago, like Toronto, you know, even the 9th and 10th seeds in both conferences. So anyway, yeah, tough losses.
Bunch of these losses go differently. The season is looked at in such a different way, and some of it's just luck, and some of it's game plan, and some of it's coaching for sure. Not calling timeouts, doing these like letting leads slip and all that. Last one I got for you. The Mavs are 5-10 when Luka Doncic doesn't play.
Seems notable.
That's very notable. And they were what? They were 0-7 when he first. Oh, they're 4-3 without Luka since the Kyrie trade.
Okay,
it's pretty good though. So that has defined the season so far.
Yeah, some of those stats are so hard because like
everything's
Luka
so
and Kyrie
different.
both have been injured.
Yeah,
some of the guys, you know, Maxey been out, all this stuff,
but 4-3 without Luka since the trade is like good. Like the trade has helped that stat for sure.
Yeah, I mean it should be.
They were 1-7 before then.
should be 5-2 with that Memphis game.
Well, that's what I'm saying with the clutch losses. It's been so many.
Yeah.
That one is definitely defined. When Luka plays, the Mavericks are 31-26. That's a 45 win pace. They have 45 wins. They would be on a 45 win pace, they would easily be 4th seed. So like just the Luka missed games. Think about all these things that we're talking about, like all these razor's edge games that they have lost in these different ways. Let us know in the comment section below. What do you think has defined the season so far? If it's a stat that stood out to you, a comment, something. If you think it's Jason Kidd, let us know in the comment section below. Thanks so much for hanging out with us on Locked On Mavs. Make your second listen Locked On NBA game to game. Every result, every game, local analysis from hosts like us that cover the team. Isaac has somehow shrunk like throughout this episode. Follow game to game on Locked On NBA on the YouTube channel, wherever you get your podcast. Guys, thanks for listening to Locked On Mavs.
Peace out.
Boom.